Hey guys, I'm going to get into Jimi Hendrix. I've been very intimidated about talking about this man for a while because of how personal his impact has been on me. This might be right with the Beatles as maybe the number one most impactful one in a sense. Even though I don't listen to his music as much now, he really does kind of have an ultimate place of wonder for me. I mean, this is really a special man because I believe that the older I get, the more I understand this man is ultimately a sexually frustrated man who just literally overgained his confidence in the most beautiful, perfect way possible, like an angel. And this is sort of how it's done in a sense. Like you just wear it. I think I subconsciously just looked up to this so much that Jimi Hendrix is just the ultimate charismatic lonely man, and he literally puts his shades of loneliness with color, and all these shades of color to kind of celebrate almost a newfound freedom. And that kind of makes Jimi Hendrix the best pop expression of freedom. I think John Coltrane is my favorite expression of this progression overall now, but Jimi Hendrix is up there and I think he's the best pop expression because there's so many great albums. I mean, well, I would say take it back. Obviously, a few like Prince, I think takes this even better. I love Prince, even or David Bowie, perhaps too, because they're about for the progression of a stardom. And I think like Radiohead, the year 2007 came around, it certainly can point out a lot of debatable content. How this is ultimately slightly dated, which I slightly agree. This is ultimately a bride of the 1960s purely, but I think I relate so heavily to this that it kind of comes full circle because a lot of the 1960s did express it as simple like kind of frustration of about building a confidence, newfound confidence for yourself. And I think Jimi Hendrix lays out this foundation so naturally that it's like I don't even have to think about it. But what he's expressing here is genius, and he has a really underrated singing voice too. So he's very soulful, and he plays literally just. I mean, it speaks for itself, And the way he can get experimental with his albums, the Jimi Hendrix Experience are really good. I mean, again, it's just no missing Mitch Mitchell and how good he is on the drums. I mean, this literally just continues the foundation of Elvin Jones into pop territory, like John Coltrane territory, as well as Noel Redding on the bass. I mean, he's so subtle, and he always continues a groove on his sounds. I just have so many fun memories of just listening to the stuff on the record player along with the Beatles. It's just like, and the foundation just literally feels timeless now, and it feels like it will always come back to this. But certainly, this Jimi Hendrix, by comparison to like the Beatles, can be more of like a high rush. And the thought of 60s stuff in general, it can be like a rush. It's like a moment of pleasure that literally I like to perceive it as this can't last forever. It's a lot of art. It's like 2000, like kind of taught me. This is a Ford. That year was a Ford foundation of kind of perceiving the depression with the color. And I think Jimi Hendrix is a depressed man who's not telling you how depressed he is. He's telling you that he's feeling good in the heat of in the moment of his nihilism. So there's certainly a sense of nihilism because detachment from reality. Because he's very living he's living so deep in the colors. But he's there's certainly a lot of depression. I mean, behind the closed doors, that's the feeling. Jimi Hendrix is so raw, but he makes it feel good in a really unique kind of way. You have RU Experience in 1967. I mean, again, Jimi Hendrix is just one of those guys where, again, like it literally is just kind of like, I think like it could be crazy to say like literally a Beethoven type, but he's almost like kind of laying the foundation like Stevie Wonder, where it's just like John Coltrane, just like how is a man? He's kind of a wonder, you could say. Like how can a man this talented, like Mozart, like and his instrumentation exist possibly? And yeah, I mean, there's a few guitarists I slightly prefer over Jimi Hendrix overall, but there's no denying how important he is at literally bringing this guitar sound to the mainstream in the best kind of style. And yeah, there's just something very charismatic about him the entire way through. But I certainly think he gets better, particularly on Electric Ladyland. I think that's his best album, most definitely, because that has the best feeling. But all your experience is just really building up with all kinds of just good instrumentation, and it feels like it's just there's not like an overbearing amount of like shock and awe value to it. Like it feels like it's just all very organic. Like I think that's what's always grabbed me about Jimi Hendrix. Is in a way that might be smoother than Bailing Nirvana did in the '90s. I think this is like a little more. Yeah, he's more optimistic about his depression. I think that's why I just relate more to that at the end of the day. I like the optimism and depression like way too much. I love it. And this is Jimi Hendrix a good reason why. It's like he's celebrating like just almost his own sorrow, and he just feels good doing it, and he just shows you how good it can feel to elevate those moods to beautiful places. I mean, that's just the perfect foundation. I think a lot of artists would do this more subtle. You could say maybe Jimi Hendrix isn't the most subtle man. That might be the roadblock that makes him not all the time. Kind of like how Frank Zappa is, where it's like, okay, you're a genius, but this isn't all the time. Like, this needs a lot of time to breathe because perhaps it is cool to market it. Even though it's pop, like it is certainly like how the Beatles are. I'm like, dang, the Beatles are more universal. Perhaps Jimi Hendrix kind of gets me in a cold, hard. Like I relate the best to this is like masking any depression or coldness I feel into something that just feels beautiful, like pure. I'm like, all right, cool. But it's like Purple Haze. I think that one's a little overplayed. I'm a little drained of that one, but it's still pretty cool all the same. I mean, the stuff I really love is like Fire and Foxy because the guitar work is just really funky. Oh man, it just feels like it just comes with great emphasis the entire way through. Manic Depression is my favorite exploration of the blues. It's just the drumming here is so underrated because it feels like it literally is continuing the foundation of the best jazz. Stuff like Hey Joe is such great blues. It's so perfect. I mean, man, Jimi Hendrix can play. When Cries Mary is about the most beautiful ballad I've ever heard. The amazing guitar solo all throughout. May this be love. Oh, I love the drumming. Like, that's a good Mitchell's genius on the drums. Like, again, Love or Confusion is just awesome. But yeah, I mean, I Don't Live Today is just very transcendental. Like, in a way, the way it kind of comes through. My favorite transcendental moment would have to be Third Stone from the Sun, which is just like an amazing reflection of just what it is to just be in a moment, as well as the self-titled track, Are You Experienced? I mean, that's just awesome stuff all the way through. So, I mean, it's just a classic that speaks for itself, and I highly recommend spinning this one. So I've been spinning some Hendrix and Beatles. It always comes back to the '60s for me. I think that's the thing. I like to explore the '70s, all at the 2010s, but there's something about home to me, and I think it comes from the Lonelies perspective. I think it comes into the '60s kind of cure it for me, completely, 100%, in a weird way, turning into it, but then like turning to the depths of delusion that's explored from everything afterwards. Expand the canvas from there. But again, I love how that's why I turn to jazz as my favorite expression in the '60s. But man, Jimi Hendrix makes it electric. That's the cool, like pop side, you can say. But Access Bold as Love is not a bad album. This is a pretty great album. Like, it's about as good as Are You Experienced? I consider them equals. I mean, they both came out in '67. Just like the Beatles had to have their psychedelic era, but I like the Jimi Hendrix side a little better. I mean, Beatles got way better in the last two. Jimi Hendrix is just a little more laid back. I really like all this. Spanish Castle Magic, particularly, it just feels like it's just taking a lot of fusion. That does feel like a lot of jazz fusion rock going into it. It's just really cool. I mean, 609. I mean, that's just really experimental in the way that it expresses just kind of like, just being drained, tired of just judgment of any kind. You just want to feel like a free bird. And it's like expressing what it feels like when you're in that moment. And Little Wing is just beautiful. It's just a really stunning song all throughout. It's like a love song. And again, this is like Bold as Love. I mean, it's just perfect. The way all the drum fills just kind of build up. I mean, it just literally makes your heart race with the God Jimi Hendrix's solo. But I feel like that does come through. Like a lot of these guys' work, there is something of heaven coming through it. Castles Made of Sand is beautiful. One Rainy Wish. I mean, the lyrics here portray something so beautiful, like Up from the Skies. It's just jazzy. Wait for Tomorrow just has all kinds of vocal progressions that I feel like you're just having fun. She's So Fine is really cool. I mean, that's Noah Redding taking over the vocals, but I heard the band was getting a little drained. I think Jimi Hendrix is just getting nihilistic. I mean, I could tell this is probably like a foundation. It's like there was that aha moment with Are You Experienced? And then it got a little draining. But I think they captured the draining energy by way of just stuff like drumming and all the funk going into Little Miss Lover, Up from the Skies. It's just, I feel like there was probably a lot of secret ego with Jimi Hendrix. That kind of thing of just like telling people I'm dude, I'm feeling I ain't the best all the time. I feel like deep down there had to be that, going on. I mean, literally, it's Jimi Hendrix, one of a kind star, and literally kind of changed the face of music in a way, influenced in a lot of ways, fascinating, you can say. And often imitated, but never fully hit this. This is unique or originally just true, you could say. I can tell that those depths of depression are real, that he's like, okay, I need to feel good here, because it feels like he hadn't felt this great in a long, long time. He has to have it while he can. That's what John Coltrane expresses. It's like this truest foundation of that's what stage performance really comes down to. It kind of does come from this ego of, I need to build myself in a certain way, but it always comes to something of a greater, superior force of some sort. It's like being able to lend yourself to that greater force while having a lot of people fascinated by what you're doing. Ultimately, that's an interesting place to be at. But you have to, and it's almost like how to retain your ego. Jimi Hendrix perhaps is just maybe doing it in about the loudest way, building up to like Electric Ladyland, which is like, okay, here's a man who probably, who knows, I feel like he probably wasn't a big success to the ladies until he took off as a star, because apparently he was so shy. I actually read he really wasn't. He became really, really good with the ladies, though. I think once he became this guitarist, so everyone comes to him. That's sort of like what I relate to. It's like I need to build things in a way where it's like, oh, okay, women will come to me, kind of ultimately, and then can lay out the dominance I need. I don't know. It's like an interesting, that's kind of why but it's like an eccentric personality, and that's why I think a lot of, you can hear a lot of like the Jimi Hendrix feeling being a little draining after a while. I think I understand it, but I don't really agree with the folks. I think I can come back to it pretty timelessly and feel pretty great. But I think a lot of Jimi Hendrix can just maybe feel. I think I hear a lot of too sexualized. You could say. I don't, and it's true because I think I look at the titles and it's like, okay, so he's a perfect man for me to kind of get into to be more laid back with the ladies. I think growing up, I did listen to a lot of Jimi Hendrix. It kind of did smooth me out, being around women. It made me happy, just in a really good way. I mean, and Jimi Hendrix is like a healthy way of doing it without being overbearing. You know, just I kind of like got a shameless love for women. That's what Electric Ladyland expresses. I mean, it's downright beautiful. Especially something like Voodoo Child Slayer, Return to the Confidence that kind of having that moment brings to it, as well as All Along the Watchtower, which is just perfect, expressing just Jimi Hendrix's raw take on melancholy, covering Bob Dylan, who was his biggest hero. I mean, he's so big on Bob Dylan, and I know the Beatles too. He loved the Beatles, but I think Bob Dylan's his #1 idol. I mean, Gypsy Eyes, it's so cool in the pop expression. I mean, Crosstown Traffic, it's just very soulful the entire way through. That's still title track Voodoo Child. I mean, golly, it just takes up like 15 minutes worth of time, but it just never loses steam the entire way through. It's just always this big progression. It reminds me, definitely with the keyboard progression of like a lot of stuff like Talk. Like, I mean, literally ahead of its time. Eric refined it. Bob Dylan has this feeling too, where it just feels very to nature in a certain kind of way. I mean, a little Miss Strange just popping. I mean, there's no Redding taking over. It's kind of this album version of like the. Yes, he's so fine. It's just fun. I'm having a good time here. Like Long Hot Summer Night just authentically captures the feeling of just a summer day. Oh, it's so cool the way this man is such a visionary. And I mean, Hendrix just really makes this great. Yeah, it feels like an alien came out of planet Earth and just showed the world something cooler. I think that's the foundation Jimi Hendrix laid in the world. And it feels like other artists might have been a little more subtle because it's like that superstar feeling. I think that's kind of loud, and a lot of people would say dated nowadays, but I relate to it wholeheartedly in the heart and spirit. But I certainly agree that there's some artists that maybe made this a little bit more laid back. But this is certainly a heart and spirit that's true and timeless, and it's important. You can maybe say it's important more than anything else. It's almost, maybe that's what's draining it. It's almost exhaustingly important what it's doing for a lot of music to come. You know, which is to just be loud and proud about yourself. You know, maybe you're like be proud and proud about your smart qualities, maybe because you had it. But I mean, it's really cool the way Jimi Hendrix was raised and kind of just taught to really appreciate the blues, you know, in a certain kind of way. I mean, you would go to the bars with Dad, and yeah, I know, like, whenever he's feeling depressed or rejected, it's like Dad would just say, just tune in to what the music's doing. You know, it'll make you feel good. And that's when you grew up. Yeah, and just the old Jimi Hendrix experience happened throughout 1967 and 1968. It's awesome. I mean, that's just, it's so good. There's always guitar solos, you know, just rock. I mean, it's just the entire way through. Like, the best song Jimi Hendrix made, I think, now is 1983. Merman I Should Turn the Beat. That's a perfect song. I love, that song hits at heart in a very special, beautiful way. I wouldn't have the most resonant to me of all Jimi Hendrix songs, along with Machine Gun. So I'll get into that a little later, but this one kind of gets more into just what it is to kind of be in a haze and a dream. But I mean, Voodoo Child, it's just the blues. It just feels so good. Yeah, Jimi Hendrix really could play some guitar, and it's really, this is the best showcase. Definitely noodle. I mean, it's like how Frank Zappa is. It is noodle, but it has a point to the noodle, which is to ultimately just make you feel a certain kind of good within your sorrows. Literally, like this the gothic energy. I grew up and I've never identified about Jimi Hendrix, but you know, I grew up on Resin. I listened a lot. Like, okay, like I almost got myself. Okay, there's something almost kind of cool about it, you know. It's just the way that he's just laying all these just energy, like songs like Come On are just grooving the entire way through. I mean, Little Miss Strange, I love that song. I mean, so much, honestly. Gypsy Eyes, perfect. It's a perfect album. This is Jimi Hendrix's album I would take with me on a straight line. I would go anywhere with this album. All Along the Watchtower is just about one of those perfect things I've ever heard. And the way that Jimi Hendrix could just take, like, it makes it sound like an apocalypse is happening. Like, houses burning down just sounds like something horrible is happening. And Jimi Hendrix kind of just captures something just not even hardly, it's actually just harsh and gritty, which reminds me a lot of my favorite films of the 70s. Like, it just feels like very gritty. I mean, it just rocks the entire way through. You just have this sweetness, just like an epic. Again, this is almost like the Soundgarden of the 60s happening here. I feel like ultimately that's the best way I would describe Jimi Hendrix. He was like a Soundgarden. It reminds me a lot of Soundgarden reminds me a lot of Jimi Hendrix. It's some weird, you know, almost like just masculine expression of just raw freedom, like raw burnout, you could say, but like capturing a moment. The Stooges kind of feel like this too. But Jimi Hendrix is the 60s take on that. I think the Stooges were progressing this to like more of the demons. They wanted to talk about their demons a little more. I think that's what got draining about a lot of the flower power in the 60s. It's like, now I think I actually can relate to so much of this, but ultimately a lot of what's draining is just, it's just too overbearingly sweet. And I think it's almost like I gotta talk about my demons. And I'm like, yeah, and I understand that, and I can agree to an extent with like expression, but all on my spirit, I think I always want to feel like almost more like this in a way. You know, the John Coltrane expresses kind of how the depression can almost override that in a certain kind of way. You know, But by going through the demons, you ultimately will feel a new sense of freedom. That might be even more pure. But Jimi Hendrix, all the same, is quite amazing at expressing what freedom feels like. And it feels like, it's just really cool. It's hard to get tired of this. It's just very awesome. Still raining, still dreaming. I mean, it's just what it is to just be in a dream, man, in a really, really cool kind of way. And there's a lot of scattered songs Jimi Hendrix did I really enjoy. Such I mean, this kind of just never was going for. I think he had a lot of science fiction influence. He was certainly getting into a lot of funk that was going on. So I think if had he lived, he would have really changed the face of funk rock in the 70s. I think that would have been his forward-thinking foundation. But unfortunately, this is what we got. But still, what he did, it literally did kind of bring forth everything. It's almost like funk. You could say, in a sense, is paying tribute to what Jimi Hendrix is laying out. That's the feeling of it all. But yeah, I mean, it's just freedom is awesome, and so is Angel. Pass It On Straight Ahead is just so funky, and I really enjoy this one because it's just funky rock, funky rocking. And Hey Baby New Sun Rising is just so cool. I mean, but I think my favorite album that consists of all those compilations. This is the only one I really care to focus on. Is the band of Gypsys, which is a different lineup than Gypsys. He recorded this in 1970, shortly before his death. I mean, on New Year's. Rock was out with Buddy Miles. It's like a different sound. It's honestly not as impressive sounding, but all the same, it's smooth. It ultimately does feel equally great on the spirit because it's just soulful. I mean, songs like We Gotta Live Together, I mean, just isn't really much of a song, but it feels like it's just kind of this, just Jimi Hendrix's final word to the world, which is, it's almost the message of Jimi Hendrix that can get redundant, which is, we gotta live together, man, kind of feeling. Like it's loud. But Jimi Hendrix can certainly be a source of a lot of that, crazy eccentricity. But, I mean, man. The bassist Billy Cox is who really gets me the most. I mean, this literally is one of my biggest influences on the bass. I remember literally growing up just playing this so much. Songs like Them Changes. And, the way that Jimi Hendrix plays the guitar is just kind of mind-blowing. So is Who Knows. These are really the best jams ever that Jimi Hendrix laid out. Although, he's literally his all-time best, I think, on this album as far as his technicality. Hitting a unique level of perfectionism in the heart. The older I get now, I can come back and I can honestly hear how much he's tapping into the heart. That's what he would have done had he gone into the 70s. He would have been less cold, honestly. So, that's the biggest tragic losses of all music right there. Jimi Hendrix died so young, honestly. It sounds like, and I've always believed through a lot of my readings, it seems like he just needed someone to fully understand him. It seems like in a way he never found it. That's a tragedy, but he would never really say that through his music. He's always celebrating, the joy of freedom, you could say. But he's always on. That's how much John Coltrane operated too. They're just always on. They don't ever stop, for a second. Breathing in nature. I guess just basically just living in their interpretation of it, basically. Creating your own world, you could say. But I mean, maybe that's what's draining about it. Maybe that's just a very detached from reality way of living. But if you're very more countryside, it's perfect. It's honestly, but all the bass here just really continues so much of what's going on. Power of Soul just hits perfect in the heart. It hits the power of love. Hendrix is certainly a wonderful man of love, expressing love in the world. And he really did a wonderful job. Insane. He was capturing Madison's insanity, but, just kind of finding peace in that in a really cool kind of way. So, that's Jimi Hendrix. Machine Gun's mind-blowing. That's about the best. Yeah, right with 1983. Perhaps it really is his best song because it just captures perfectly the spirit of doom. It's his most gothic song, you could say. The way the guitar plays is just very hypnotic. The entire way through, it just captures perfectly just what depression feels like to him. I think that's the most harsh he ever spoke about his depression. That does bring some of the best jazz expression. That's what I had to recognize. It sounded like John Coltrane, Miles Davis. A lot of really intense depression. Lives in that. And I've been living in it in my own kind of way. But that's the kind of what's coming to the surface. It's depression is being masked, and jazz is kind of maybe the ultimate expression of breaking free from that. Jimi Hendrix just does that. It's like he does what Miles Davis, John Coltrane are doing in a just a pop kind of way. Basically, that's what changed Miles Davis so much. It's like a new way of reaching the people. You could say it was like the new way of the freedom. Is being felt in a very unique way, and that's the originality about Jimi Hendrix. I like to perceive. Just how were the 1960s just feeling whenever Jimi Hendrix just came around like this? That had to be a wonder. It seems like he's just a wonder that came around where just of chaos and just kind of made his own sense of it, sense of freedom, fun. And just to interpret Jimi Hendrix and just to feel out a lot of what he expresses really is quite timeless. I don't listen to him all the time, but he really, because I think what he hits into is almost too personal. I feel like it is literally, I think it's such a subconscious influence that he kind of just, it's almost like he's just an influence for life because, it's just go ahead, live in your illusions, live in your colors. Don't be afraid of it. You know, like there could be a lot of rejection of it in modern expressionism, and I can relate to the meaning of all that. But I always feel in my heart, again, maybe that's not maximalism, but I can relate to this feeling of just go ahead and just always be in it, be in colors, even though you need to be hard and cold. Honest about the coldness. Maybe Jimi Hendrix could. And that's where a lot of art maybe tried to take it. Like Yes even took it further. It's like it has to be kind of a little bit less cold. Maybe this is a very cold-hearted level of just I'm feeling great, because it's like a lot of this doesn't really, even though he's feeling this way, it's like he's not really saying like I feel kind of awful, dirty out here, although he does, but it's crazy, but you don't know it one bit from the way he expresses himself. So it's like, if no one says it, how would anybody know? Kind of thing. But everyone came to Jimi Hendrix. He was really a fortunate man whenever he got famous. Don't get me wrong. From 1967 to 1970, he was a walking legend. But yeah, his legacy, and it lives on forever. That's the kind of thing. But it's pretty interesting, man. He's cool. He's one of a kind. Jimi Hendrix Experience, particularly, and Band of Gypsys. I recommend that stuff to literally everybody.